Hello again. So today we are going to test out a mTLS scenario using the CFSL Certificate Authority PK setup that we set up and discussed in one of our last discussion. So with that discussion so far, what we have with us, we have CFSL installed, and using that we set up a root certificate authority and further created two intermediate certificate authority, one for client and one for the server. And from there we issued two leaf certificate, one for client and again one for server. So now, using those leaf certificate or knowledge of client and server certificates, we are going to test out a mTLS scenario, right? So we would need two things basically. We would need one client, one server. We are going to use browser as our client, and as a server, we would use a basic Python Flask app that we would use as a web server, right? Now to understand the technical context here, right? So when my client is making a connection to the server, two things will happen there, right? Server would present its certificate to the client, and client need to verify the server certificate against some of the certificate authority that it trusts on, right? That's one thing. So client is verifying the server, and when client connection is reaching to the server, server would accept a certificate being presented from the client side, and it would verify the server certificate against some of the certificate authority that it trusts on, right? So both side of parties will validate each other identities against the certificate authority that they trust on, right? So basically we need to tell the server about the certificate authority of the client, and we need to tell the client about the certificate authority of the server, so they can have the knowledge about certificate authorities of each other, right? Since it's a private CA thing, so we need to manually import those things on each side, right? So let's start with the server first. So like we talked, we are going to use a Python Flask app. It's again a very basic Python Flask thing, no complex or fancy configuration there for this purpose. So we are going to tell a few things to the Flask as a web server, like what is your server certificate and key, so that we have defined server certificate and key. Rather simply saying the server leaf certificate, we are passing a full chain. What does full chain mean? That I'm providing a complete chain of that certificate, like the leaf, intermediate, and root, a sort of chain of trust, right? So it can have the knowledge about the complete chain of that trust, right? Similarly, the corresponding key, and then I need to provide the information about the certificate authority of the client that the server would trust on, right? So that's where I have provided the client intermediate CA certificate, and in the route, we have written a few basic loggers, basically two loggers, like when the client is passing or client is presenting a certificate, we could we could see like what certificate is being passed, and we can decode and learn what information is coming along the way, right? So that's the logger and route, and the main logic is here. We are passing the server certificate and key, and then we are saying that client is mandatorily expected to present a client certificate, right? So the client certificate is required here. That's the main thing. Without a client certificate, the connection won't be accepted, right? So, and where would it validate or verify against? The client intermediate certificate authority that we have provided the information, right? All right, so now we have to set up both side of things. So first thing first, we would need this full chain. I had it already, but have deleted it. So let's create it again, right? I'm on Windows, so I'll be using uh, Git bash as a alternative to bash things. So let's create the full chain file first. We are under the CFSL play. Let's see what all files we have. So we simply need demo server probably 2.pam. That's the leaf certificate for the server. And then we need to add on the intermediate knowledge. So that is in demo server int ca, and the public part of it, which is the certificate, demo server int. What's the name file? It's going to be a PAM file and ca.pam. And then we need to add on the root certificate authority information. So we know that that's under our root certificate authority structure, and name of file or the certificate is going to be, sorry about that, rootca.pam. And we simply need to create a file. We can call it as fullchain.pam. So that's one thing. So we should be having a fullchain file created, right? We would need another thing here, like I told, we need to import the client certificate on the browser. But there is a catch that my client or my browser doesn't understand the PAM format. It only recognizes the PK12 format. So we would need to convert my client certificate in PK12 format. So we can use OpenSSL utility. Let me see if I already have it saved. Yeah, that's there. So we are going to have simply pass that OpenSSL PK12 export from which certificate demo client 2.pam. That's my client certificate, corresponding key, and which file I want to get the output in. So a PK12 format file, the name of the file, demo client 2. Let's see. So a password is required there, and let's verify that. All right. So now we should be having a demo client to PK12 format file. And now let's do the importing thing. So first thing first, on the server side, let's see if we have this chain of trust file correctly passed there. Let's see. All right, since I'm on Windows, so I need to take care of this special character thing. Okay, so we have passed a full chain file for the server side of thing, and the corresponding key is correct. Demo server to key.pam, which is the server leaf certificate key, and client certificate authority is also correct. Let's see. Demo client in CA and nca.pam. So we are all set from the server side. Now we need to set up the client, which is going to be our browser, Firefox particularly. So we need to go to settings in the browser, search for certificates, and there we need to import the certificate, right? So we are going to import two things. One, the client certificate. Let's do that thing first. And we have already created a PK12 format file for that. So that's one, demo client 2. Let's have it imported. Password that we provided there. All right, so we have the client certificate installed in our client, and we also need to pass the certificate authority knowledge from the server side, right? So we can do two things. We can create a sort of chain of trust for the server, including intermediate and root CA, or we could individually pass those files, whichever works best for us. But to make it simple, let's create a um, sort of chain of trust file for the server. So we would have two things there, intermediate certificate authority certificate and the root certificate authority certificate. What does it mean? That when the server is presenting its certificate to the client, client would verify that server certificate against this thing, which is nothing but the server intermediate CA and the server root CA, right? So let's do that. Demo server int, there is my server intermediate CA, and I need to include the certificate for it. So demo server int should be a PAM file, yeah. And then I need to add knowledge about root server, so root CA and file for certificate, and let's call it as serverchain.pam, right? We should be having that file created there. Yep, so serverchain.pam. Let's import that as a certificate authority into the client, right? So let's see if we have that. We named it as serverchain.pam. That's the one. Okay, let's trust it, and that should be it, right? So we are all set from both sides. We have set up server, we have set up client. Now test out the um, actual scenario, right? So let's run our Flask application, meaning let's run our server. So let's copy the URL and let's try it in the private window for Firefox. Let's open the private window. All right, so my client, which is browser, now is going to access the server, which is the Flask web app. Let's see what happens. Okay, first thing you notice, it did not complain anything about server certificate because it trusts the server certificate, or basically it trusts the certificate authority from where the server certificate is issued. So my client is not complaining about the trust for server certificate. That's the one thing that client has verified my server certificate. One side of thing. Now server need to verify my client. So for that, client is expected to pass a client certificate, and there it's prompting for that, right? So we know that localhost, which is the server, is requesting a certificate for my identity as a client, and we know that this is the client certificate that we have imported there, right? So yeah, probably Flask is not that full-fledged web server, so it doesn't work very well. But just for the POC and demo purpose, we can use it. Let's try it again. Yeah, so that's the client certificate we are going to pass it. Let's pass it, right? All right, so my client passed a valid certificate and which server verified against the client intermediate certificate authority. All success, right? So that's the logger that we are returning as well on the route in the Flask app. That client certificate is issued and received, and this is the certificate that is being received. It's nothing but the client certificate that we passed, right? Now let's test out the same scenario with something wrong, so we can actually see if the mTLS is really working as expected. So let's hit that again. Again, the server is expecting a client certificate, but this time not pass the one which we created here, right? Let's pass something else, which is a random certificate sitting there on my browser. I don't know for what purpose it is there, but certainly I know that this is not the client certificate that my server would accept, right? Let's pass it. All right, so this is very much expected that my server did not accept it, or my server did not accept that client certificate because it could not validate the certificate which I pass from the client against the certificate authority that it trusts on, right? So that's good check. It's as expected, right? Now let's also do one thing. Let's also remove the server side of certificate authority knowledge, right? So let's go to the certificate and go to that demo engineering CA. Probably it should be under demo. Yep. Let's remove it. So what we have done, now my client doesn't have any knowledge about the certificate authority for the server. So one side of check should be failing again, right? Let's try. All right, so that's one thing. My client is complaining about the server certificate because this time it doesn't have any knowledge about the certificate authority from where the server certificate is issued. So one side of TLS or one side of you can say verification is failing, right? This client is not able to verify the server identity or the server certificate because it doesn't have any knowledge about the server certificate authorities. Yeah, but we can still try with the next step. So one step got failed, which is what we wanted it to be. And then the secure connection failed. Let's try it again. Okay, let's give it a new try. All right, so this thing is failing, which is okay. Yeah, but server is still able to request a certificate from the client and we have a valid client certificate, so let's pass it. Yeah, so you saw that this time the server validation got failed because we removed the certificate authorities, but client certificate is still um, working because client is passing a valid certificate which server can verify. All right, so that was the mTLS demo or testing in real scenario. How does mTLS work and how we can use the CFSL um, as a certificate authority and um, can play around mTLS using that. All right, so that's for today. Thank you all.